else, I started listening to a TED Talks business podcast. So there had been other podcasts that I'd come on, and they didn't really grab my attention, but this one did. So it was by a young lady called Elise Roy. Yes, Elise Roy. And what she was talking about was design thinking, why what it is and why it matters the most. So that got my attention because it connected to how we engage with people in terms of when we are trying to establish ourselves in business, and people meaning like our customer audience. And it connected with me because it was on a humanistic level, that sometimes we make business so complicated when it can be straightforward. So everything she was saying, it was connecting into how authentic you are when you connect to people, how impactful you are in that process. So I looked up a definition on Google, but the topic that she was talking about, I took a few notes. So she was talking about designing for disability in order for all of us to benefit. So for anybody who's a creator, for anybody who's a designer, is to start from that point, thinking from the position where people do not have the same abilities as everybody else, and designing a specific project around that community and their needs. And then she also explained the concept, or the way I took it was that it's a social design and social value. So social value and social design, again, it's linking into thinking about the community itself. What is the need of people? Because one of the things that tends to happen without us even thinking about it when we are setting up businesses, sometimes we start something and think it's a great idea, but we work in isolation. So we develop it, and then we, engage with the public, only to find out that maybe this is not even something that they're interested in. Or we've also seen where organizations have gone into developing countries and they've decided what those developing countries or small communities need, at times without even engaging with the community to find out from them what they need. The best source of knowledge, from what I know and what I've experienced through the years of working with people, including customers, is that as the American term goes, is that the customer is always right. And that's why this actually linked to me very well. It's always right in a way that they're useful. They're a very useful resource in telling us what they want. And it's also similar to what Facebook is doing. Facebook usually takes on views of customers. So, for instance, they are able to monitor what the interest levels are. Including the video now, it's something that they've probably looked at what is the best thing to develop based on customer need as well. So the things that she talked about that were essential, and in terms of what I mentioned before about being humanistic and authentic, especially if you're thinking about starting a business. I'll flip my camera so that I can share what I actually wrote down with you or typed. Don't know if you can see that. So number one, in terms of the essentials, she initially said that define the problem. So defining the problem, understanding its constraints. So just that means that basically when you're looking at designing a business, looking at your community and seeing what it needs, what are its pain points, what are people saying is something that worries them or concerns them, or what do they struggle with that they would need. So you would design that specific thing that you're passionate into assisting customers. Then empathizing, observing people in real life situations and empathizing with them. So observing, sometimes as an example, when I need a break, I tend to go to a cafe and drink coffee. Try not to drink too many. And I just observe people. I observe the interactions, and I also listen to, not necessarily being nosy, but it's just in terms of how people are engaging with each other. And in some ways, there are also other business or entrepreneurs who also do take time to observe people in their community, including what they may be wearing or what they may be equipping themselves in terms of products that they have that are surrounded by them. And this is where their ideas come from. They look at how they can develop something even better, or to develop in terms of better, it's like refining that product so that it makes life easier for their customers. Then she went on to talk about ideation, which is throwing out thousands of ideas. And she explained how it was that the more the better, and also the wilder the ideas, the better. So with this one, what I linked it into is either creating like surveys or belonging to a community group or a mastermind of creators where you can bounce off ideas with other people rather than working like in isolation. If you're starting out as an aspiring entrepreneur or a small business, in that way, then you also get some ideas of the likes and dislikes, not necessarily having to go into detail if you're developing something that's still you haven't refined yet, but it's a good place to measure likes and dislikes, also ways to receive constructive feedback. Then I'm linking that to prototype and test. So it's ways of gathering what you can find to mimic your solution, to test and refine it. So I jumped ahead. That's linking to what I mentioned before, is that you're gathering information when you're in the community by observing people and looking at how you can refine it based on already what's in existence. Because sometimes what tends to happen is that it's good to have lots of ideas or inventions, but sometimes people create things like from nowhere and launch them without having any other product that's similar to it. And sometimes that process doesn't work or it crashes just because it's something that does not connect like authentically with people. So those were the quite essential things which I thought were quite useful in terms of developing a business. And there's also another fifth one which I left out, which was sustainability. So implementation, ensuring that the solution you come up with is sustainable. So at times we become money hungry. We think we need it now, and anything that we do, we think about money rather than thinking about how can we set up a business that's long term. So how can we create something, think small and then scale it up to the point where you're testing it out on a weekly basis or on a yearly basis until you fine tune it. But every time you're thinking about your business, it's about how can it be long term, how can it connect to people, and also how can it be sustainable. Because the ones that create a business just from like inception, thinking about money, usually it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the thought concept of it, unless if it's connected to human beings, I was gonna say human nature, unless if it's connected to human beings and involvement and feedback, then people will not relate or associate to it. Because people do want to know where you're also coming from, who you are as a person, and how you're going to solve their problems. So in terms of if you're an entrepreneur who wants to get yourself out there, this is what we are also discussing today during my online session with my friend from the US, was about how can you get yourself out there if you're starting a business, and when is the right time to do that. And my advice or recommendation would be start now by linking yourself with professional networks or networks that are close to what you're passionate about. So whether it be like social or whether it be like on a professional platform, and those networks don't even need to cost like a thing, but it's more about people knowing who you are and also being aware that you're working towards something. Yeah, so at least they're recognizing you as the potential. So you're like branding yourself initially, and long term, it's something that will pay off, because through that process, you're also sharing information with people who are either struggling, and you might be able to offer them a solution, or you might meet somebody else who's actually been where you've been, and they may help you move a little bit faster and help you to get to the solution that you need, or you may not even have known that there was such a solution. So it usually helps, again, not to also like work like in isolation, but to engage with like minds and to engage with your potential customers. So your customers are people that you ideally think would benefit from the product. So you're serving them a service that may benefit them. And that service is something that when you create it, you're thinking about how can it be sustainable long term. So it was quite a useful podcast, which I thought very key, and also linking into things that I am passionate about as well. So I'm just looking to see if I've missed out anything else. No, I haven't. So I just I just thought I would share that with you. So if you've got like any particular questions, or you're curious about any process that I've discussed, even you're just at the inception, you're just thinking, oh, it would be a good idea to set a business, but you don't know where to start, or you're already doing something, but you don't know how you can promote yourself in terms of like recognition via social media platforms, do feel free to message me, and I can arrange like a session. Everything that I do is online at the moment. So I can arrange like a half an hour session with you just to look at what you're potentially like considering. So that's it for me for tonight, and hope you have either good night or a good afternoon or good morning, just depending on where you are. Ciao.